All right, everybody, welcome to preview review number 4. Today, we are doing a very anticipated film. A lot of people are extremely excited. This may be the first big blockbuster since the pandemic 2 years ago. And this one is a very, very important one for the Walt Disney Company in particular because this film is going to be very pivotal to the shelf life of their biggest cash cow, that being the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And the film we're going to be talking about today is Spider-Man No Way Home. Man, a lot of people have been very excited about this film. I'm kind of indifferent on it. I personally, Shang-Chi was the film I was most excited for this year coming out of the MCU. And I liked the film. I didn't do a review on it because I was still figuring out my PC and all that at the time. But what I can say is about the film is I liked, aspects of it. I thought, a lot of the Eastern philosophy that was explored was really interesting. But again, the movie, the third act, completely divulged into a CGI, crap fest, and that's a shame because I wanted to see a great finale with great stunt work in that film, and instead we just got dragons, which was kind of bland. But I thought that there was a fight scene in particular with Shang-Chi and I think this other ninja guy. I don't remember who he was, but they were fighting like in this building, and there was like a broken window, and then like a helicopter came out. That scene in particular, if you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. That scene was really good and had some great action, but overall, I didn't really love Shang-Chi all that much, but I was really excited for it. But most people were excited for this film right here, Spider-Man No Way Home. I mean, yeah, Spider-Man is the biggest character in Marvel. There is no doubting that. There is no question. But with that, he's already had a couple of films in the MCU now. Obviously he was introduced in the Marvel Civil War storyline where he was just kind of like shoehorned in there for the trailer, and I did like his appearance though. I thought it was a good intro, and we didn't need another origin story with Spider-Man, frankly. But at the same time, they kind of throw you into it with this character when you get into Homecoming, which I've seen a couple of times now. I haven't seen it. I think I watched it before Endgame was the last time I saw it. And I didn't love the film. I didn't love it when it came out. I saw it in theaters and I didn't love it. I thought it was okay. I just wish it had, a couple levels deeper to it. I wish that the villain had a little bit more. Michael Keaton is the villain, but again, it wasn't bad. It was just kind of forgettable amongst the mix of MCU movies. And then you get Spider-Man Far From Home, which I actually did a review on. I'll try and release that. I still gotta see if I can find it on my old hard drive. But there was a Spider-Man Far From Home was the second film with Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio. And again, I thought that one was actually better because it had more of a story to it. But again, I thought there was definitely more needed in terms of like actual character development with Spider-Man, and that's kind of where I'm at with this character with Tom Holland Spider-Man. Is there just isn't like any character development for him. Like, they have a little bit of it with him and Tony Stark, and that's really it. Now that like Tony Stark is out of the story, it's just kind of been difficult for most of the fans to really be interested in what Spider-Man has to do. So this film has a lot riding on it. It needs to be big. As you can see, this is the preview section, so we will be talking no spoilers during this time, but then I will leave and go see the film, and then I will come back and there will be spoilers then. So right now I'm just talking about what I think about the film, my expectations, and then obviously we'll get into the spoilers in the actual film itself in the review section. But I mean, going back to, I just wanted to make that clear, even though this is the 4th episode of preview review. So if you haven't watched the other 3 and you don't know the rules, that's the rules. It's pretty simple. It's pretty self-explanatory, as they say. But anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, Spider-Man, and how pivotal this film is for the MCU. With Spider-Man, this has to be $100 million movie opening weekend. And I'll talk a little bit about the box office here in a moment, but this movie needs to be huge. It needs to be the big, eruption that will get people's eyes on the MCU again. Because frankly, I mean, people just have not really been that into, the series that the MCU has been putting out. Me in particular, I guess this is more of, me speaking. I'm not going to speak on behalf of people, because there are people that have enjoyed everything Marvel's put out, but frankly, I have not. I've talked about this already. I did reviews on WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier, and I didn't love either of those series. Still don't. Loki, I thought, was even worse. I watched the first 3 episodes of What If, and I wasn't into that either. I'll probably go back and watch the rest of them, but the animation style for me was really what's just steered me away from What If. I just thought the animation was really jarring. Especially, I watched the first 4 episodes, and I was just like, I mean, what value is this really bringing? It's just, I don't know. It's kind of, I mean, it's a fun idea, I guess, but like, I just didn't like the animation style. If an animated film or movie doesn't look good to me up front, that's automatically going to be a problem, as far as if I want to watch the whole thing. And that's kind of where I'm at with, What If. I'll probably go back to it. And then Eternals, which is the most recent film. I have not seen this film. I think it might be the first Marvel film I haven't seen in theaters. I didn't see it. I had heard it was horrible, and I didn't really, I'm going to wait till it comes out on D+, because I didn't really care to go see it. And, I was pretty jammed up at that time and couldn't get a review out that weekend. So I just, was like, forget it. I'll get around to it. And that's kind of where I'm at. I'm just waiting for it to get on Disney+, and then, I'll probably get back into it, and check it out. But it's just like, I was like, I'm not going to go sit down and watch a 2-hour and 40-minute film that I heard wasn't great, and I'm really not all that interested in. But anyway, let's go on to an article here I have from Deadline Hollywood. Spider-Man No Way Home global box office to sling minimum of $290 million opening weekend. So I was talking about this earlier. This needs to be an absolute home run for Walt Disney, for Marvel, for the MCU as a whole, for Kevin Feige. This needs to be an absolute home run, this film. And by home run, $100 million. If this film can't make $100 million this weekend, you might as well start closing out the MCU and packing up your bags and figuring out something else, and looking through the $70 billion worth of 20th Century Fox IP that you bought, and start digging through the well, because the MCU, the cash cow, might be up if this film can't make if this film can't make $100 million. Do I think it's going to? Absolutely. If it doesn't, it's an absolute travesty, and Disney might as well start thinking another direction here. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think this film's going to make $100 million. But it's going to be a real barometer for films, going into 2022, as far as, will studios be pushing films back again, with the Omicron scare and all that? Will they bite on it and, push the films back? We don't know. But let's take a look here. For all mishegas, I don't know what that means. What is this word? Oh, senseless behavior. Mishegas. Oh, it's a Yiddish word. Interesting. Anyway, had to do a little grammar check there. See, if I see a word I don't know, I always like to look it up, and then if it's something I think is cool, I'll put it in the pocket for later. Anyway, it has endured through the pandemic, including streaming threats, day-to-day window crunching, blah blah blah. Spider-Man No Way Home arrives. The reliable 18 to 34 crowd. I mean, this is it, man. This is what they're going for. They need no holiday distraction, a weekend rainstorm in LA. Alarmist news headlines that'll prevent people. Yeah, and that's the question. Are people going to go out this weekend and see this film? I personally, anecdotally, know a few that are actually going to go out and see this today. which is this is Thursday the 16th that I'm recording this. People are going out to see this today. So I think absolutely, people are excited for this. And I think, this is the first big film since Endgame of the MCU. I don't think this is even going to make close to Endgame money. Absolutely not. And it's not expected to. I mean, we're not going to be reaching those 200 million weekends for a while, I think. I think it's going to take some time before we start getting back to the days of $200 million opening weekends domestically. That's not in the cards for this film. There's no way it can make 200. Now, let's continue here. Who co-announced the 200? Between Sony and Disney, the latter who co-financed this $200 million sequel at 25%. Also having Tom Holland's web slinger in another Disney Marvel film, the multiverse tee-up or culmination. And yep, this is what I think they're doing. They're gonna you could kind of foresee this once Sony and Marvel made the deal. You're like, okay, so they're gonna share Spider-Man, and it didn't seem like it was gonna be that way. But I think with the Venom film, post-credit scene where he sees Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Spoiler alert, sorry. But that film came out a couple months ago. Come on. Anyway, with that post-credit scene and all that, it was a no-brainer for Sony and Disney to share Spider-Man. It was a no-brainer for them. So, it was only a matter of time before we got that. And now they're just gonna, and how they're gonna do it historically and canonically is they're gonna use the multiverse as a way to kind of share the IP. I mean, I guess, and that's the thing. You can already see they're starting to scrape for the barrel, which is why I'm even bringing up this as a concern in the first place. Most of the time, a Spider-Man MCU film, I mean, the other ones made over 100 like that, I'm pretty sure. I don't quote me on that. Actually, let's look for ourselves. Homecoming. How much did it make opening weekend? Spider-Man Homecoming. Yeah, it made 117 million right here. $117,027,503. And made over 800 million. So, yeah, there's that one. That one made over 100. Coming off the... Yeah. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I was going to say coming off the heels of Endgame, but that hadn't come out yet. This one was the one that came off the heels of Endgame, Far From Home. And this one, I can't recall if this one made over 100. I'm pretty sure it did. No, it made 92. Yeah, this one made under 100. But again, this was coming off the heels. Endgame, I'm pretty sure, was even still in theaters at this point. So it's like, even making the comparison is a little bit, But, nevertheless, I think this movie is going to make over 100. If not, but again, Far From Home only made 92. I didn't even realize that it didn't make over 100. But I mean, did it make $1 billion for the year? I mean, did it make $1 billion? Yeah, it made $1 billion worldwide. Not for the year. I mean, worldwide. Yes, it made $1 billion. Which Homecoming did not. So we'll have to see what this does. I mean, and I'll give a prediction before I go see the film here. But anyway, going back to this, fans are expecting a smart sequel that raises the stakes no other way Spider-Man has. What they've been asking for, arguably more action in No Way Home than in Shang-Chi, and follow more heart than the Byzantine plotted Eternals. As far as Sony is seeing at least $130 million in Thursday previews. So they're thinking 130, and that's, I'm probably, I'll give my prediction, but is that what Sony's saying? Is it says U.S. Canada go I can't read today. U.S. Canada prospects go. Sony is seeing at least $130 million at 4,325 locations in Thursday previews, starting very early at 3 p.m. with all the strength of IMAX and PLF screens, and possibly even 200. What was it say? Rivals in tracking see the opening much higher in the 175 million plus range, possibly even 200 million. Even though everyone is high because No Way Home is the biggest movie they've seen on tracking for quite some time. Right, and that's why it's kind of fun to predict films right now and predict the box office. Because like before it was like, you know, you kind of had an idea of what films were going to flop and which ones were going to make money. But now it's just like, who knows, man? And I mean, we'll have to see what happens. Because I mean, again, you know, they're going to use, and that's the thing. If this film doesn't make money, COVID will be the reason. That's what Disney will claim and Sony. Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. I mean, the only thing that's making me think that it won't make money is that you know, a lot of the films in the last couple of months have just not been making money. You know, Ridley Scott's Last Duel didn't make money. You know, Eternals didn't make that much money. Shang-Chi didn't make that much money. You know, Black Widow made 80 million. So like, if this can't beat Black Widow, what are you doing? And I know Black Widow's a July release, but still, like, come on. This is Spider-Man. This is your biggest IP. And it's a Christmas slate. Like, this movie should make a crap ton of money. And I think it's going to. It's just a matter of, you know, who's really gonna rush out and see this. But we'll do my prediction now for money and how much this is gonna make. If I had to predict what this was gonna do as far as money, I would say I'm gonna probably go 120 million, 125 million. I'd say max. The most I could see it doing is 150, but that is a reach. I really think 150 is. I don't think it's feasible, but maybe. I mean, you know, it's hard to tell. It's going to be really hard to tell. This number is either going to blow people out of the water, or it's going to be a really big disappointment. Like, there's just no middle ground. I feel like for this film, like, it needs 100 million. Is definitely going to happen, I think. So yeah, I'll go 125. Anyway, we'll talk a little bit about the story here, and then I'm gonna go see this film, but because it starts in a little bit actually. But you know, we left off the last film with Spider-Man, you know, being, you know, everybody figuring out what his identity was, who he was, you know, and everybody kind of being like, oh, you know, Spider-Man's now Peter Parker, and now he's got the big target on his back, and he got framed for like all of the crimes that Mysterio was doing as well. So it's like, yeah, now it's just it's gonna be interesting to see what they do, and they left it all big open ended, but you know. With that, you know, you can kind of go in a lot of different ways, and now with the multiverse being introduced, and you know, a lot of these big opportunities to bring in all the IP. Well, you know, it seems like to me that Disney's getting very desperate here. And with that, you know, they want to get their IP out that they just spent $75 billion on top of the fact that, you know, they're doing this business deal with Sony. Really, they're just trying to scrape at the barrel and get as much of an ROI for, you know, the money they overspent on, you know, 20th Century Fox properties. They're trying to get that ROI back on it in any way possible. And with that, you know, they're gonna bring in all the characters from Sony and from Fox. In this case, Sony. And that's why, you know, the big rumors. Obviously, we're seeing Alfred Molina back as Dr. Octopus from, you know, Spider-Man 2, which is a classic film that, you know, I really enjoyed when I was young. So, you know, the bait is there for sure. And then you got Willem Dafoe coming back as the Green Goblin. And then I'm sure we're going to see, you know, Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire back. I think it's almost a guarantee. They've been teasing it, you know, and they've done a great job with the marketing of this film, I have to add, in terms of, like, you know, building the stakes of, you know, this, multiverse and bringing in the old villains, but at the same time keeping the reveal of Toby and Andrew Garfield away. I think that's it's been really brilliant the way that they've, pulled it off, and without really people finding out and seeing any footage, like nothing leaked, nothing came out. It's been airtight, and it's good for them. That's good for the film. But I think it's a guarantee we're going to see Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield in this film. I think it's almost a lock. They've been building it up. We've seen set photos of the costumes hanging on like a hanger. I remember seeing something like that. Who knows if there's any validity to it? I'm not even going to try and pull it up because I have a feeling if I try to, I'm going to see a spoiler. I've been very, very walking on eggshells as far as like gathering information on this film because I don't want any spoilers. But yeah, as far as how they're going to make this all work, and that's really my biggest concern with this film going in is like, how are they going to make this all work story-wise? How are they going to bring in all these old characters and not make it feel like it's a forced, cheesy, gimmick of, oh, look at all these old characters, nostalgia bait, the Memba Beans. We don't want it to be like that. I want this to feel natural. I want this to feel like the old Marvel movies in that sense, where everything just felt like it existed there. Things don't feel that way in the MCU anymore because they've taken away so many of the stakes. They've taken away so many of, the reasons for you to care. The character building has really taken a back seat to the world building, and that's a problem because they have to work hand in hand. They have to work side by side, world building and characterization, and you can't have one or the other. And that's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid this film's just going to be too gimmicky. It's going to be too, remember how great Spider-Man 2 was? Remember how terrible, amazing Spider-Man 2 was? Remember how horrible, Spider-Man 3 was? It just, I don't want it to be gimmicky, and that's where I feel like the MCU is going. It feels like they're running out of ideas, and the reason I say that is because, you look at film like Shang-Chi, and it felt very formulaic, very much like the Marvel blueprint, introduce character, quirky friends, and then, fun-loving guy that has, some hidden responsibility. We've seen all this kind of stuff before, and it feels like they're running out of ideas here, and it feels like they're reaching too far into the gimmicks bin as opposed to making us care about these characters. I mean, and that's my thing. Like, Tom Holland Spider-Man has had really no characterization throughout any of these films. Like, that's really my biggest. I mean, outside of his relationship with Tony Stark, which was really well done, but outside of that, we don't really care about this character. We don't know anything about this character, all that much. Because they don't want to make it they didn't want to make an origin story, which I understand, but it's like, with that, you're kind of missing out on a lot of it almost feels like you're missing out on chapter 1 of the story, and I mean, at the time it was good that they did it that way because, it was so redundant, but that almost just plays into why we need to take a break from some of these characters like Spider-Man and like Batman and just let them breathe. Let them breathe for at least a couple of years before you come in and start making more films with new actors and new directors and new writers and a new studio. Like, take a breath, a deep breath, and let the IP gain value over time. That's the problem I think Disney's going to have here moving forward, especially if this film doesn't meet their satisfactions financially, is the interest factor here. What is going to make people interested in the MCU moving forward? There's no big characters outside of Spider-Man at this point. So it's like, I mean, and if Spider-Man, if the wheels fall off, if this movie sucks, because I think it's going to make money, but if this movie sucks, like, that's going to be a real problem for Disney, Marvel, and, their investors, and the whole bottom could fall out from all this. In terms of the MCU. But I'm just speaking worst case scenario. Like I said, that's not going to happen now. And if this film has success and is really good, and I come back here in a couple hours and I'm like, that film was off the chain, then the MCU adds another at least 5 years to their shelf life. I really believe that. This is a very pivotal film for them. it's up there with Endgame. Endgame obviously was so much more pivotal for, ending that whole storyline. But now it's like, why, but at the same time, the prerequisites for Endgame had already set up the hype for it. But this film, it's like people are just kind of wondering why we need to care about the MCU anymore. And I think it's this film's job to prove that to people. Why do we care about the MCU moving forward? Because frankly, nobody's really that excited about, any of the films or series they have coming out. Not the same way they are about this and maybe Doctor Strange a little bit. Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, which this film will play into. But yeah, like I said, I think this film's going to make 125, 130. I think that's probably right. I could see it making a little less, but I don't see it making under 100. I can't see this making under 100 million, or else that is an absolute L for Disney. If this makes 92, L. 95, L. This needs to make at least 100. And even at like a 105, I'd be like, okay, like that's, they'll be fine. But like, this needs to be a gangbuster. That's my point. This needs to be a home run. And it very well could be. It very well could be. So we'll have to see what happens. I'm definitely interested in, this film and the story, more so than I think I can say for, many of the MCU films that have come out and TV shows that have come out this year. So yeah, this is really going to be a big barometer for me. Where is this series moving forward? Why are we supposed to care? And please give me some characterization for Spider-Man, our hero. Give him some sort of dilemma here. And I know that the whole gimmick of this is that he wants everybody to forget that he's Spider-Man, and that's the whole thing. And he wants Doctor Strange to do that for him. And yeah, well, we'll see how that works. I'm interested in this film, man. I'm excited. And I don't really have that much else to say. So this has been the preview section of the preview review. So I will be going to see the film. And I'll come back and give you my thoughts. But I really hope, please be good, Spider-Man No Way Home. Please be good. Because if not, the MCU, it could be in trouble, I think, because ultimately this film's going to make money, but what the MCU, what Marvel, what Disney's looking at is the future of this franchise, of this intellectual property. How much more money are they going to be able to make off this? And that's going to really determine whether or not they're going to keep making these films. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, preview review. So this is the preview. Review will be coming. So be on the lookout. Thanks, everybody. And you'll be seeing me pretty soon. And we're back from the film Spider-Man No Way Home. Man, what a film. 2.5 hours long. Epic MCU comeback film. Was it everything we wished for and more? Let's talk about it. So, actually, before I start, I should mention that I did already record a full review of this before I realized that I didn't add the mic input for every single scene that I have for this whole setup that I've been doing for my new, as you can tell, my new preview review setup. So, I had to redo it. So, yeah, it is what it is, but I guess that means that it's good because I can kind of get through the plot way quicker than I did before and kind of hit all the big beats. But first things first, let's talk about the spoiler-free portion. That's why we're still in the spoiler-free zone. So if you have not seen the film yet, you're safe, you're good. We're not going to talk about spoilers right now. I just want to talk about what I felt about the film, my feelings on the film. Not really the plot or anything quite yet. Until we get into spoiler territory, but I figured I'd give a little bit of just my, overall, impression and thoughts on, the film, Spider-Man No Way Home. So what did I think? Was it everything that I was looking forward to it being? I was really just hoping, that this film wasn't just a complete nostalgia bait mess where they just threw a bunch of, cameos at you and didn't really give you the meat and potatoes of the actual direction of the MCU and of this character, Tom Holland Spider-Man, which I mentioned I wasn't very impressed with the first two iterations of the Spider-Man series, that being Far From Home. I'm sorry, Homecoming and Far From Home. That's what the first two are called, and I wasn't really impressed with either of those that much. I thought Far From Home was pretty okay. Um, I was pretty so on it. Um, but yeah, what did I think of this film? I thought this was definitely better than those two films. In terms of just the pacing of this movie, I mean, for a 2.5 hour movie, the movie does move pretty quickly. I mean, it there's a good kick to it, especially in the first act. It jumps around, but I like, that fast paced style of filmmaking. If you're going to do a long, big epic film like this, where you're going to have a bunch of characters and moving parts, like, I like it to be choppy and quick in that kind of way, and I felt like this movie had a good pace to it. It didn't move too fast too, to where you didn't understand what was going on. I felt like, they did a good job of really making the actual story and everything make sense. For example, without going into spoilers, I just think, actually, I won't give an example because that would actually go into spoilers, but I'll just say this much. This film is very satisfying, and it, whatever you're looking for, it'll give you some of what you're looking for. And ultimately, it delivers, and there's definitely some very satisfying moments, especially if you're a fan of Spider-Man, you're a fan of the Spider-Man films. You'll definitely be pleased with a lot of what happens in this film, but also, with that being said, the story at times, there are moments within it that feel like they're just there to get you to the big reveals and to the big moments and to the big sequences, and it doesn't feel like, it doesn't really feel as complete as it probably could have been, had they not had, everything else tied into this movie that there is. But also at the same time, they wouldn't be bringing in the $100 million plus that I think this movie's going to make this weekend without it. So, it is what it is. But overall, I thought the film was pretty good. It had really everything I was looking for. The action, the CG is pretty fantastic. The CGI looks fantastic. The action sequences were really entertaining. Definitely some of the best that the MCU's had to offer since Endgame. And I think this is definitely the best film since Endgame. The best thing the MCU's done since Endgame, in terms of characterization, in terms of story, in terms of emotional beats. I mean, this film has it all in terms of fan service, which this film has high dosages of. Memba beans all over the place for sure. But I think at least, I was like, I'm fine with that. And I'm fine with fan service in general, as long as it serves a story, it serves a purpose. And I think it does in this enough. And I'll get into it in the spoiler review. But yeah, I mean, with that being said, I mean, that's all I've got to say about this film without getting into too much spoilers. I did enjoy the film a lot. But yeah, if you stick around, you'll find out, how I really feel about it. Because, there's a lot in this film that I don't want to give away. And if you haven't seen it, I recommend you go check it out. I think it's it's a really fun film. And, it's a good bounce back film for the MCU. And I think it's going to make a lot of money. But again, it gives me some concerns moving forward as far as, creativity and originality in the MCU moving forward. And I'll dive more deeper into that in my spoiler review. But yeah, that's all I've got as far as spoiler-free review. So if you haven't seen the film, now would be the time to check out. We are entering the spoiler zone, so be prepared. Yep, there we go. Spoiler review time. We are entering the review section officially, even though we're technically in it already. We're entering the spoiler zone. So if you have not seen Spider-Man No Way Home, go check it out. I think it's worth your time. I think it's a fun film. If you like the MCU and you like what they do, I think this is definitely, one of the better ones we've seen lately. But again, is it one of the best? No, probably not. I wouldn't even put this in the top 10 MCU films, probably. Maybe the top 10, but not anywhere near the top 5. But I don't even know if I would say top 10, maybe top 15. But yeah, I do think this is a good film, and it's a good bounce back for them. It's going to be a cash cow, and yeah. But if you haven't seen the film, go check it out. this is your spoiler warning. And yeah, spoilers and plot are coming in. I'm going to do a countdown just, even though I already have the spoiler thing up. We're going to do it in 3, 2, 1, spoiler time. So, yes, we're going to get into the plot here. Got it pulled up. So, this film starts off in the end of the last film, Spider-Man Far From Home, where Mysterio is wreaking havoc on Europe, and he frames Spider-Man for it. And then basically everybody finds out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. He reveals that to everybody. So then basically the film picks up right at where that left off, and the Department of Damage Control, which is basically the Homeland Security, shows up. They arrest Peter, MJ, Aunt May, Ned, and they're all getting interrogated. They try to, get some quippy comedy in there, but it all kind of falls flat. But ultimately, they get Matt Murdock to help bail them out, I guess, of this whole situation. This was one of the things that I didn't really understand about this film going into it was what exactly, within the first 20 minutes, I was like, okay, well, what exactly was the point of the last film? I mean, outside of just revealing Peter's identity, like, there was no closure on the drones. Like, who, we all know Mysterio did it, but like, how come, do people, because there was a large portion of people protesting and complaining that Mysterio, was justified in saying that Peter was the one that released the drones, and they all believed him. So like, they never gave any actual closure to any of that. And I mean, obviously with what happens at the end of the film, with everybody forgetting what happened to Peter, it doesn't really matter. But at the same time, it kind of does when you want to go back and watch these 3 films again, because it's like, what is even the point of Far From Home? Like, if all of this just ends up getting thrown out the window anyway, it feels like, sorry, I'm fixing my camera. But yeah, it's like, what's even the point of Far From Home at that point? It just seems kind of irrelevant. Anyway, but it is cool because you get Matt Murdock in here from Daredevil, and you get Charlie Cox back playing him. And listen, I love Netflix Daredevil show. I'm definitely gonna do a review of Daredevil Netflix series at some point, because I think it is fantastic. It's one of the best TV shows of the 2010s, in my opinion. In general, just television shows in the 2010s. It's a brilliant show. And Charlie Cox is so good as his character, so I'm glad. I'm assuming they're probably going to either bring the show back in some capacity, or maybe give him a Daredevil movie. But like, honestly, I just want it to be as hard-edged and gritty as that show is, and I'm just afraid that the MCU is going to cheap out on it and make it watered down. But nevertheless, it was a cool cameo, and I like the thing with him catching the brick and all that. It was a cool moment. But anyway, Ned and MJ and Peter, they go back to school, and they try to, this whole subplot with going to MIT and all this, I just thought was so stupid. And I feel like they could have thought of something better for these characters to be doing to kind of build a little bit of characterization. Because I know that's really what it's for. But I did like some of these like fish out of water scenes with Peter just having to adjust to everybody knowing he's Spider-Man, and the protesting and all that, even though it doesn't make any sense, because like, does Matt Murdock just get them off on this? Like, I don't even know what happens, like, with the whole Mysterio thing. It becomes kind of irrelevant, and it's like, okay, well, whatever. I guess the multiverse is more important now. But it's like, whatever. They just throw the whole end of the second film into the waste bin out the gate. So I thought that was kind of stupid. Anyway, this stuff with MIT I thought was so ridiculous, and it was like, really, I love how they're like, oh, I will not go to any other school except for MIT. We have to go to MIT. And it's like, I love how like elitist they are, yet at the same time, like they try to like make Peter Parker like, this small town like Queens kid, but yet he only wants to go to MIT. And it's like, oh, and then they get upset and feel so slighted when like they're not admitted to the most competitive school in the United States. Like, I just thought it was so silly, the whole MIT subplot, and I thought they could have come up with something much better, and I get like, I'm kind of grasping at straws here because this is, well, you're thinking, well, who cares? But it's like, it's, the little things like this that make good movies just good and great movies great. is the little things like this. They could have made this more interesting, is my point. And they run with it throughout the film, and it just is like, who cares about MIT? Like, golly. Like, yes, they're a great school, but there are other amazing, schools out there in this country and across the world outside of MIT. Like, why don't you guys just pick another school and go there? I don't get the fascination. I mean, whatever. Anyways, so Peter gets upset about this because he feels guilty that, like, they're not getting to go to MIT because of him. So, like, because, he's wrapped up in this whole thing with Mysterio, even though, I don't know, whatever, it's stupid. So it's just to get Peter with Doctor Strange. That's the point of it, which happens. He goes to Doctor Strange because he's like, I want people to forget I'm Spider-Man, and Wong's like, no, and Strange does it anyway, which obviously is going to build a nice tension between Wong and Strange for the new Doctor Strange movie, which they showed the commercial for at the end of the film. At the end of this film. Anyway, the spell is damaged because Peter's like, yo, I want to add Ned, and I want to add MJ, and I want to add all these people to it that I want to still remember I'm Spider-Man. And Strange, like, doesn't work like that. And then he ends up, like, putting it in a box because, basically he puts the spell in a box because, to end it because... things were it was starting to like collapse because of all the edits that Peter was trying to give to it. And then he's like, yo, why don't you just go talk to the, MIT person and be like, hey, I'm Spider-Man. Like, let my friends go to your college or whatever. Strange is like, why didn't you even like consult them about it? Which is kind of a fair question, which, I mean, just makes this whole thing just kind of stupid. I mean, I don't know. I feel like they just, like, with this whole thing, they just couldn't figure out a way to, like, open the multiverse, so they had to, like, make it, and they couldn't figure out a way to open up the multiverse without making Strange look like a complete idiot, so they just kind of put it all on Peter and Strange at the same time. I don't know. I just think it's kind of stupid, this whole, but again, ultimately what comes of it is entertaining enough that I can look over some of this stuff. But again, it's just things like this that, you look at and you're like, this could have been done better. And I think with more, like, creativity and taking a little bit more time on some of this stuff instead of just trying to crank it out, which is what a lot of this stuff feels like. Even though this movie, I would say, is definitely the best written of all of them, I would just say in general, the MCU does a lot of this stuff. And it feels very contrived, which is my biggest complaint with a lot of this film, is that everything feels like it's just trying to build up to the reveals and to the, action sequences and to the, to basically those two things, to the action sequences. And I get with an action movie and with these kind of movies, you have to build up to the action sequences, but it felt like everything that even decisions that characters make, and that's the biggest problem I have is some of the decisions that these characters make, and I'll get into it, but like, decisions that they make in this film feel like they're done just to set the movie up. It doesn't feel like it would be a decision that a normal rational person would make. And this MIT thing, I just think this is just kind of silly more than anything. I don't think that's one of those examples, but I think it's just silly. Anyway, so Peter goes, he gets the idea from Strange to go basically to talk to the MIT professor, administrator, and basically try and get Ned and MJ to go there at least because he knows he's not going to be able to go. So he basically stops her and has this weird conversation with her in the middle of the street. And she's so calm as, like, Spider-Man is literally talking to her in the middle of the street. Like, I just was like, okay, like they couldn't have picked a better setting than the middle of the street. Like, why couldn't you have just had it happen at the airport? Well, I guess because then you would have had to have the fight scene happen at the airport, and we've already had a fight scene in an airport, so that's fair, I guess. I mean, I don't know. Maybe make her have take a train then. I don't know. Anyway, I'm nitpicking. As he's talking to her, Doc Ock, played by Alfred Molina, shows up, who we saw in the trailers. And it's his first appearance as this character in about 20 years, which is crazy, since the original Spider-Man film. And he basically thinks that, this is Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker, and he basically goes after him. But Peter's Iron Man nanotech ends up getting in his claws, and it actually was kind of a cool fight scene in the way they did this, to where the claws, you know, when you see the nanotech get in the claws, you're like, uh-oh, Peter's in bigger trouble now. But it ends up being that he uses it to control the claws, which was kind of a cool little funny moment. And it was a cool way to end the fight scene and neutralize the character. It was smart writing. Yeah. More than anything for a good fight sequence. And this was a cool scene, and it was just a cool reveal. And the de-aging, man, Marvel has nailed the de-aging at this point. Because, I mean, I remember back in the days of Rogue One with how bad the Grand Moff Tarkin looked, but this definitely looks better, I will say. Alfred Molina looks pretty good, and you know, it's great to see him back as his character. I mean, I love Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2. It's such a great character. Anyway, yeah, he basically neutralizes him and puts, and then and then as he's fighting him, I mean, as he's neutralized him, then Green Goblin shows up, and then they basically, Doctor Strange shows up and gets him out of there as Green Goblin's just showing up. And then Strange basically gives some exposition and explains, you know, basically that these villains, you know, Dr. Connors from The Amazing Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield is there, you know, in one of the chambers. And then you have, obviously, Doc Ock. And, you know, basically Strange explains to Peter that, you know, these villains are coming here because they created a ripple in the multiverse where everybody that's looking for Peter Parker is coming directly to their universe, which is cool. That's fine. That's the plot. Interesting. You know, Peter basically, with the help of Ned and MJ, needs to help get these people, and he basically goes after Max Dillon and Flint Marko. Now, remember Flint Marko? He was the Sandman in Spider-Man 3, and then Max Dillon was Jamie Foxx in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which came out a few years ago. Yeah. That movie was really bad. I saw that one in the theaters. But it was cool to see Jamie Foxx back in this movie, though. It definitely was. Definitely fan servicey. Even though, like, those movies were bad, they were still, like, entertaining, at least. Ish. Not really. Maybe I'm just being a little bit, you know, rose-colored glasses, I guess. Anyway, you know, they go there and like they have the big fight scene in the woods and all that, and that's a cool scene. And I like the, you know, seeing these characters back and all that. And then you see Sandman, and it was cool to see him back. And yeah. Then you get Norman Osborn, who goes and he's picked up by Aunt May, and you get, you know, basically the scene with Peter, Aunt May, and Norman Osborn. And it's interesting because, like, you know, you see the de-aging, you can kind of see the de-aging looks I would say the worst on Willem Dafoe, but it looks good enough. You know, because there's definitely some shots in this film where you're like, yeah, you can see whatever, but you know, it looks good enough. It looks good enough, man. You know, I mean, that movie was made 20 years ago, but anyway, you know, Osborn is there, and he's, you know, basically trying to get sympathy and connecting with Aunt May and all that. And Spider-Man's like, we need, and you know, Peter's like, we need to, you know, send him back to his world. And she's like, no, we need to take care of him here. And it was like, you could totally see where it was going, that he was going to turn on them, you know, and from that moment you knew it. And it just, the problem I have with it is it kind of ruins Aunt May, because like it makes her just seem so naive and like dumb in this movie, and that's my biggest problem. Like, they almost ruin Aunt May in this movie and make her so naive and, like, you know, unassuming, you know, to trust, you know, a guy from a different dimension. You know, it's just like from a different universe. It's just kind of like, hello, he's a villain. Anyway, and Spider-Man knew that. Anyway, Strange wants to send the villains back to their respective universes and meet their fates. However, Parker wants to cure them before sending them back to prevent their fated deaths, which I think is kind of silly. I mean, they're villains, dude. And I mean, the only one that was actually like worth redeeming was Doc Ock, because because he was only under the influence. He was only doing evil under the influence of his tentacles, not really because he was that evil. But the others were all just flat out evil. Like they were all kind of irredeemable. So it's like, oh, just because you can just get rid of their powers doesn't make them not evil. I feel like, you know what I mean? Like I was just like, that's kind of silly that he would take such a stance on it to the point where he was willing to go to bats with Doctor Strange over it just to fight for people he doesn't even know. You know, I thought that was just kind of, I mean, I guess, you know, and they kind of make the argument, well, he's just Spider-Man, you know, that's what he does. He saves people. And it's like, I mean, I guess, but it's like, you know, I don't know. It's, I mean, I feel like there's just a better moral dilemma to have than this. I don't know. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. But the fight scene that comes from Peter and Strange is cool. It's really fun. So I guess that's a cool moment. I think it's probably one of the coolest fight scenes in this movie. I mean, the music is swelling. I mean, I will say that the score from Michael Giacchino is really good in this film too. It's definitely one of the best MCU scores in a while. Anyway, yeah, so Peter goes out. He kind of tricks Strange, gets out, gets the cube, takes the villains to Happy's apartment. He cures Octavius by creating, you know, this thing that neutralizes the power of the arms, the octopus arms. And then he's trying to fix Osborn and Electro, Dylan, Jamie Foxx. And as he's trying to fix them, Green Goblin, I guess, takes over Osborn and turns on him. And Goblin basically manipulates Dylan into turning into Electro. And then, you know, he overrides the device that Peter gave him. And then basically, Peter, you know, he tries to, you know, be like, hey, like, let's just work this out. But they all leave. And Octavius even tries to negotiate. And they're like, nah, get out of here. In the battle, then they get in this big fight, which I think is cool because you get like the big sand tornado and all that, which was kind of with, you know, the lightning and all that from Electro. That was cool. But then in the battle, Aunt May gets drilled by Green Goblin's, you know, glider. And then Peter tries to save her, and you get this great emotional scene with Peter and Aunt May, and Aunt May dies. She says, great power becomes great responsibility. And it was funny because, like, you see him walking out, and I was like, okay, I'm like, how is she just walking away, like, so okay? And then as soon as she falls, I'm like, okay, at least she's going to die from this. Because I was like, look at all the burning rubble, and, you know, there was a grenade explosion, and, I mean, come on. There's no way Aunt May could survive that, and she doesn't. So, I mean, I guess you know. It was a great moment, and it was really a good character moment for Peter. I just wish from the other two films did more work in building this relationship more. Because, I mean, there are a couple of scenes that they do, but it needed more in those two films of kind of building this relationship. Because, you know, when this happens, you know, you feel the weight enough to where it works, but just, I don't know, I wish, you know, with this being a third movie in a trilogy, I just feel like it should have had more weight to it. And, you know, anyway, MJ and Ned. Okay, yeah, this was so silly too, where Ned just learns how to open portals just out of nowhere, you know, with Doctor Strange's ring. He's like doing like this, trying to say something, and like the portal like opens up like almost, and then he like learns how to like open up the portals. And I was like, this is so silly because it's just like them having to fast forward to you know, it's a plot hole because, like, you know, we're taught in the Doctor Strange movie that, you know, learning how to be a wizard and all that takes like years, and like Doctor Strange being able to pick up on that stuff is very rare, and even he had a very big learning curve in, like, well, literally a learning curve in building the big circles. But yeah, it's like, you know, he learned how to be a wizard and being in the, you know, wizard cult or whatever it is, you know, the order of sorcerers or whatever, you know, those guys, all they do all day is meditate and train and learn how to, you know, and spend their entire lives learning how to do this magic. And then, you know, friggin' what's his name Ned learns how to do it on accident. Come on, man. It's just ridiculous. Thought it was silly. But they use the ring, and then this ultimately is the plot device that is used to summon Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker, who we see in the most like weird reveal ever. I wish they would have had a better reveal for these two, for Andrew Garfield and who will then see Tobey Maguire, who comes second. Which I thought it was smart to have Garfield be the first reveal, because obviously he's kind of like his movies were the worst of the three. He didn't even get a third movie, so he's definitely has the worst Spider-Man movies of the three Spider-Mans we've gotten in this century. But so it was smart to kind of have him come out, but people still wanted to see him in this role, including me. I liked him as Spider-Man. I think he was probably one of the most convincing like Peter Parkers in terms of like capturing the essence of the character of Peter Parker, because like Peter is kind of awkward and like quirky like Garfield was in that role. So I thought he probably was the most authentic Peter Parker. But in terms of like Peter Parker and Spider-Man, Tobey is that guy. Tobey is that guy, and he shows up, man, and it's so awesome. I was so happy to see him. I mean, I love, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. To this day, I still think they're fantastic films, and there's definitely, the first two. Third one, it's aged okay, but I still think it's bad. I still think it's a bad film. I know people have a softer heart on it, especially nowadays, and I think of it more as like a funny like black sheep comedy of the third of the trilogy. It's like kind of like the weird cousin. But I don't like the film to this day, but I love Tobey as this character, and it was so cool to see him back in this role, and I'm so glad he did it. And we all knew that Tobey and Garfield were going to do this, and I'm so happy both of them did it, because it was such a cool moment. And now they can go on with their lives without having to be asked about this anymore, which would be good for both of their sanity, I'm sure. Especially Garfield. He was getting asked about it every 5 minutes. I mean, literally every interview he did with the press, he was getting asked about doing this film. And he was just like, I don't know anything about it. Don't ask me about it. I don't know. He did a good job of hiding it, because frankly, I would have just been like, at one point, I was just been like, yes, I'm going to be in the movie. Like he just revealed it. But they did a good job of keeping it a secret, and it's going to pay dividends, because people are probably going crazy in the theater. My theater went pretty nuts. Yeah, it was a good moment. Anyway, yeah, we have, so we get their reveal, and it was cool. You get to see them, interact, and they had some good comedy with the cleaning the spider webs and all that. That was okay. Then we got Ned and MJ. They find Peter, who's mourning over Aunt May, and then we get this really interesting scene, which I actually really liked. And it was kind of the bonding moment between the three Spider-Mans, where they all kind of come together and reconcile with the fact that, Aunt May's dead. And I like how, like, Aunt May died. But, the thing is, I kind of mentioned how Aunt May kind of dies, like, senselessly. It actually really works well within this story. And I actually like that about her death, is that she dies so senselessly, because that's how Uncle Ben died, in the other, Spider-Man films. And like when they talk about it in this scene, it's really, really well done and really touching, because they kind of use the other two films to push up this film and push up this Spider-Man and make it like, this is his moment to really be his own person, because he learned great power, with great power comes great responsibility, and that whole big saying. And that was his moment, and this that's why I think this is an origin trilogy more so than like an origin, than like Homecoming being an origin film. And that's why this wasn't, Spider-Man didn't necessarily get an origin film. He got an origin trilogy in this case, and that's what this was, and this was kind of the culmination of that, where he's, officially, the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And we'll talk about that towards the end of the film. But yes, I like this. It's kind of, serves purposes as giving good characterization of Peter. It's a great scene, good acting from Tom Holland, but also as a good connective tissue between the three universes and the three Spider-Mans. So that was really a cool moment. But then they plan basically to fight the villains, where I love how all three of the Peters like know exactly how to beat the villains, know exactly the cures that they need to get. Toby's like, oh, let me just go whip up the antidote I need to defeat Green Goblin and Sandman and all that. It's just like, okay, like, again, just kind of contrived. Another thing that really kind of pissed me off in this movie was that, just like small stuff like that. It's just like, come on. Like the cures and like that whole concept, I think, is kind of ridiculous and plot devicey to say the least. Just to kind of make up for the fact that they had to take so much time to do fan service and other stuff, that they just kind of threw this in there. Like, oh, yep, we're just going to whip up all the cures and figure it all out. Don't worry about it. But anyway, they basically, meet at the Statue of Liberty. Strange ends up returning. The three Spider-Mans, it was awesome to see them fight, and you get the big money shot of all three of them, together. Then you get Octavius. He ends up, joining them and helping defeat Electro. Rips his arc reactor out, which is what he stole from Happy's place. He stole the arc reactor and used it to charge him up. But yeah, they basically, Sandman gets beat. Connors, he gets turned back into a man from a lizard. And then, and then, you get the cool little moment between Andrew Garfield and Jamie Foxx, which was funny because it's just like those movies were so blah, but at least they gave him some closure. But also I love the moment with MJ where Andrew Garfield saves MJ, and it kind of harkens back to the Gwen Stacy moment where where she died, and again that ties into the last scene where they were talking about how they had loved ones die too, and that's kind of a part of being Spider-Man, which was an interesting thing. And it's cool how they all kind of got their closure. Anyway, so then Strange comes back. He starts seeing that the universe is breaking, the fabric of it starts cracking. You start seeing the villains start to come from other dimensions. Peter is pissed off and he's fighting against the Green Goblin. And then he gets angry and almost kills him. He punches him 90 times in the face and then almost stabs him with the Green Goblin glider. But then Toby stops him, and he has this great stare down with Tom Holland Spider-Man. It's this cool moment where it's this the older grown statesman Spider-Man teaching a lesson to the younger Spider-Man, don't do this, don't make a mistake, don't be vengeful, and it's this cool moment of closure, especially since Osborn and Peter had so much bad blood. To see so much maturity from that character 20 years later is so cool. It was such a cool moment and such great acting without any dialogue, just smart physical acting from a guy that really wanted to give some proper closure to this character that we all hadn't seen for 20 years. Anyway, but he then is stabbed by Goblin, and you think he's gonna die, but then he doesn't, which is good. And Peter then saves everybody by stabbing Osborn, and then stabbing Goblin, and then Osborn comes back. And this whole thing with Osborn and Goblin flipping back and forth was not really that that hardly explained in the original film. It's just kind of softly explained that he has this kind of bipolar thing, but it's not really that hard drawn in the sand, which is what I liked about the original character, was that obscurity of is he really that evil, or is it all just kind of in his head? But in this film, it's just obviously all in his head, and I kind of didn't like that about this movie. It's almost like they retconned the first movie unintentionally, and it's not that big of a deal, but I just it is kind of integral to this plot, because that's kind of the reason why he turns on them in the first place, is because he can't control the Goblin or whatever, when it doesn't seem that way in the first film. It seems like he has more control over it. I don't know though, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Anyway, Peter and MJ, they love each other, blah blah blah, but then Peter, to prevent further catastrophe, tells Strange to cast a spell to counteract what's going on by making everybody forget who he is. And this is kind of a strange thing because, like I said, it kind of defeats the purpose of the last film because, then the cops aren't after him anymore because they don't know he's Spider-Man and blah, blah, blah. But the biggest thing is for me is, like, with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, like, are they now, like, not, is nobody going to know who they are when they go back to their universes? Because they said, like, you won't remember any, but, that nobody will remember Peter Parker as Spider-Man. So, like, will nobody remember it for them too? I don't know. I thought that was just kind of strange. Or nobody remembers Peter Parker at all is really what it is. But nevertheless, like, yeah, nobody remembers him. So it's like, will everybody forget Parker's existence in the other films as well? Will everybody forget, Parker's existence in for the other Peter Parkers, for Andrew Garfield and for Tobey Maguire? That wasn't really explained. I don't know. But then anyway, then you get to kind of the epilogue of the film here. And I like the shot here at the end with this, with the sun and all of that, where they're standing in the Statue of Liberty. I thought that was really, really cool aesthetic production design. Much better than the Marvel series' Loki in particular, which had a horrendous production design. Anyway, Parker then goes to the coffee shop, tries to introduce himself to Ned and MJ. They don't really recognize him, but he kind of chickens out, and it's like, you know what? This doesn't feel right. He then goes to Aunt May's grave, sees Happy, and they have this awkward conversation, even though Happy doesn't recognize him. I think that's really the point. But that's what they're trying to show. But at the same time, it's like, I wish they would have just kind of stood there in silence. I felt like that would have been more powerful than having some corny conversation. Then Peter gets a new suit and, gets a new apartment and becomes the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man that I guess we all know and love. And, the film ends with him swinging through New York in the snow at Christmas time, and it cuts to the credits, which is cool. And yeah, it was, cuts to credits. And then we get the mid-credits scene here, which we'll talk about, which shows Tom Hardy's Venom. And he's sitting at a bar in, like, some tropical place talking to the bartender, and then, talking about, the MCU, essentially. And then, Venom is then transported back to their universe at the end of the film. They're almost like dusted away, like in Endgame, only it's a different effect. It's like a glowing away kind of effect to show that it's different. But they're sent back to their universe, and then but he does leave a little bit of the symbiote on the counter, which means we'll probably get a new Venom. And it'll probably be the bartender or somebody else. Maybe that comes to the bar. We'll have to find out in another film. But I thought that was a cool little thing. And again, tying the Sony universe together with the MCU. I mean, for anybody that thought that wasn't going to happen, you're a moron, because these two studios are going to run to the bank with this. That was the plan from the beginning, I guarantee you. And I think this film proves that. Beyond a shadow of a doubt. But then the second post-credit scene is just essentially a trailer for Doctor Strange 2. Which, I feel like that's what they're going to do in the future with a lot of these, is just, with these after-credit scenes, is just end up making them trailers. But yeah, that's the film, man. That is Spider-Man No Way Home. And, I really like the film. There's a lot to like here, Like I said, action sequences were on point. The special effects were on point. The acting was on point. Writing was there. But for me, like I said, there was just, again, there was some problems that I had with the writing. Some of the characterization could have been better, especially with Aunt May, in particular. But I thought that what they did with Peter was pretty good, and emotional, and worked. The stuff they did with Peter and MJ could have been better. I thought some of the romance, like the FaceTime scene at the beginning, and some of that stuff was a little bit cheesy. And I think the first act of this film, the first 20 minutes or so of this film, is a little slow. And I think until the bridge scene, it gets, that's when it starts to pick up pace. And from there, I thought the pace was really good. But again, I thought the opening was good, and then the next 20 minutes or so. Another person I forgot to mention was J.K. Simmons. He's in this film as J. Jonah Jameson, and he's very funny in this film, man. He's kind of like a pseudo narrator of this film. They use him to kind of dump a little bit of exposition out, which is great. Because he was obviously great in the original films, but it's funny because in this film he's like basically a parody of Alex Jones and InfoWars. That's essentially what the Daily Bugle is in this film, is just InfoWars. And he's got the desk that Alex Jones has, the studio with the microphone on the table, and he's obviously got the voice for it, the voice. It's just it's very funny, and good free promotion for InfoWars as well, I guess you could say. From the strangest of places in Disney, you never thought that would be a place they would find free promotion from. But yeah, it was a funny little parody, and definitely added some good levity and exposition to the film. And I like that. This is that. When you got J.K. Simmons playing this role, for how great of a meme he is at this point, for how much everybody loved him in the role in the original films, you had to bring him back. And to bring him back as this parody Alex Jones was really a funny touch and was really smart. So yeah, there's a lot to like here. Like I said, some of the jokes, I'm not a huge fan of Marvel's humor, so that didn't really land for me all the time. But again, there is definitely a lot to like here. The action was good. The performances were good. The emotional beats hit when they need to. But again, my biggest problem with it is this film just feels very contrived at times. It feels like everything is just heading towards revealing to the characters, revealing, Toby, and revealing Garfield, revealing Alfred Molina, revealing, Green Goblin, revealing all these characters, and not actually, giving the due diligence to just simply tell a story. And that's the biggest problem I have with the MCU and for the MCU moving forward. And that's honestly my biggest fear for this film and for the MCU moving forward is where do you go from here, because with this, it's like, where do you go? Because it's like, with the other solo films they've done recently, Black Widow was no good. Shang-Chi was pretty underwhelming. WandaVision I didn't love. Falcon and Winter Soldier I didn't like. Loki I thought was terrible. So What If I wasn't a huge fan. I didn't like the animation style. So excuse me. But I just was not really into a lot of what Marvel came out with in Phase 4 so far. Even, Far From Home, I had, liked it, but had problems with it. But this film was definitely a step in the right direction. But with that being said, the biggest thing that made this film so satisfying was the reveals, was, the nostalgia baiting and memba beans that this film provided. That was really what made this film so, memorable and likable. But they don't have that kind of power to use for every film, and that's the thing. They're gonna have to get creative eventually. They can't keep banking off nostalgia. They can't keep banking off memba beans. They can't keep banking off older properties. They're gonna have to get creative eventually, and they're starting with Moon Knight and some of these newer properties, so we'll see what happens with it. I'm excited for that, and maybe some of these new series. But I'll tell you what, if the MCU doesn't really, get too creative in the next couple of properties, and if they don't make properties like this, but as long as they make properties like this, I'll continue to watch. But what I'm saying is if they don't make properties like this and they continue to make properties like, WandaVision and, Falcon and Winter Soldier and Loki and, Black Widow that are just bland, recycled, lifeless, stories, then I'm not going to really be that interested in the MCU moving forward. But if they continue to bring the emotion, with their character development and really, push the boundary with storytelling, like they have kind of with some of their earlier films like Guardians of the Galaxy and even the first Doctor Strange film. So I mean, like I said, I still think the MCU has tremendous upside, and I think I wouldn't say upside, but financially for sure, but I wouldn't say like they have tremendous upside, but I'd say this film is going to give them some more shelf life for sure. And I think moving forward, though, they're and I think this is definitely going to be a big success for them. But I think moving forward, they're gonna have to get more creative, and especially with their newer characters. I mean, this film is really relying on older characters, not even from the MCU. I mean, imagine, they're gonna have to really churn out some interesting content over the next 5 to 10 years until they can build enough time in between the present day and Endgame to where they can bring back Chris Evans and Robert Downey and all these other people, which inevitably probably will happen at this point. I mean, let's be honest. They're bringing back characters from movies they didn't even make. Wait till 10, 15 years down the road when they want to bring back Chris Evans and, whoever else, just wait on it. So, but I'll say this much. To wrap it up, my final thoughts and my review, and my final thoughts, and I'll give my grade for the film, and then I'll get on out of here. But, I would say my final thoughts for the film, man. I thought this was a really good looking movie, and it had good action and good emotional beats throughout it. But, at the same time, a lot of it just didn't feel, all that, authentic to me. I guess would be the biggest thing in terms of storytelling. Characters made decisions that didn't feel real. The idea for Peter just irrationally run off with the box, behest to Doctor Strange, and for Aunt May to just trust, Norman Osborn. So, frivolously, I thought was just ridiculous. And for Peter too, as well. I thought was just kind of a ridiculous plot point. How easily they come up with the cures, how easily, Ned learns how to, use the Doctor Strange magic. I mean, there's a lot of silly stuff like that, but if you can look past that stuff, there's a really fun movie here, and it's definitely one of the best of 2021. And yeah, I will say it was definitely pleasing. I liked the film. And, if I had to grade the film overall, if I had to give it my best thoughts, I really liked this film. Like I said, action was good. Performances were good. Visuals were good. For sure. The CG looked fantastic in this movie. So, I mean, there is a lot to like here. And if you're a Spider-Man fan, like I said, you will really appreciate what they do as far as, Tobey and, Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland. I mean, like I said, that scene with them, before the fight where they're talking about their powers and the webs and all that was really funny. They had some good comedy, and it was cool to see these guys back in the Spider-Man suits again. And it was cool to see this whole reunion and the way they made it all work and make it all make sort of sense. I mean, it made pretty good sense, good enough sense. I'm not going to harp on it too much, and I'm not going to give the movie too much grief. I've seen much worse this year, so. With that being said, if I gotta give this a grade, I'm gonna go Spider-Man No Way Home. I'm gonna go 4.5 out of 5 for this, man. I really like this film a lot. There's a lot to like here. I've said that a few times now, but that's just how I feel about it. There's a lot to like, and John Watts did a really good job. Chris McKenna, Eric Summers, the writers. They had a tough task here to work with. I mean, it's not easy to sit here and bring all of these old characters in, all of these old storylines from films you didn't even make or have anything to do with your studio. Sony did, but not, Marvel, MCU. So it's like, it's crazy to bring all this in and then tie it in with the MCU's storyline and make it all work. And the fact that they were able to, I give them props. Because guess what? They've dropped the ball on other stuff. I mean, Shang-Chi was the film I was most excited for this year, and it was not great. It was fine. I liked it, but I liked this much better. And I wasn't expecting to, at the beginning of the year. So, yeah, I was pleased with this. I really liked it. Step in the right direction for the MCU. This thing's going to make $130 million. I think it can make, I said 125, though. My bet is $125 million. I'm sticking with that. But yeah, 4.5 out of 5 is a fair grade. I couldn't go any higher just because of some of the plot points, especially in the first act. I mean, some of that stuff is just silly, and it separates. It's the little things like that that separate a good movie from a great movie. And the 4.5 is a really good grade, though, man. This is a really good film, and I think John Watts did a really good job directing this, making it a fast-paced, easy watch for a 2.5-hour film. And even though the reveals for Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were a little bit underwhelming, with them just kind of walking through the portals. Hey, just close behind me. I was just like, that's kind of stupid, but whatever. Outside of that, I'm done harping on too much of this stuff. I'm getting a little nitpicky, and that's, whatever. It's a review, if you didn't notice. But, yeah, I've said all I need to say. 4.5 out of 5. Check this one out, though. When it comes on Disney Plus, if you haven't, or go check it out in theaters. It's a good experience, and it was cool to see this with a full crowd and get the live reaction. So yeah, thanks for watching, everybody, and that's all I've got for this film. I've talked enough about it. Thanks for watching. I'm gonna definitely do more of this kind of stuff, especially going into the new year. I've got my year-end list coming up, probably towards the end of the year and into the beginning of next year. Those will be coming out. I'm gonna be gone for about a week and a half. Which I'll get into in the future, but if I don't make another episode before then, happy holidays, but I'm sure I will. But anyway, check out He Don't Game. That's my series going on right now. It's my gaming series. Just kind of a fun little place. I go live and just kind of chill out and play games. So doing Madden, or not Madden, ESPN NFL 2K22. So check that out on my channel. Thanks for watching, though, for real. I'm going to be doing more of these kind of preview reviews, and also I'm going to do live reviews. But, now that I've got the setup ready and the audio is good, so hopefully I don't have to reshoot this again, because I'm done going through this plot. I've gone through it enough. I understand the film, and yeah, that's enough. But thanks for watching, everybody, and there's going to be more to come like this, so peace out.